This is Jim Fetzer in Madison, Wisconsin, with David Scorpio from the exotic land of Ecuador and Michael Ivey from Nashville, North Carolina. We're here to bring you the latest news you need to know. We begin with key points from a Trump campaign press conference on challenges to the election results involving Rudy Giuliani, Sidney Powell, and Jenna Ellis, who turns out to be quite brilliant. Observers were prevented from watching mail-in ballots being opened. Allegedly unequal applications of the law in Democratic counties, where some were allowed to cure defects with their ballot, but in Republican counties not. Voters arrived at the polls to discover other people had already voted for them. Election officials were allegedly told not to look for defects in ballots and to backdate them. Ballots cast for Biden and no other candidate were run several times through the machines, repeatedly, again and again. Absentee ballots were accepted in Wisconsin without having been applied for. There were allegedly overvotes, some precincts requiring more voters, really more votes than voters. I mean, it's just astonishing. The voting machines and software are allegedly owned by companies with ties to Venezuela and to the left-wing donor George Soros. This Dominion software thing is a very big deal. The Constitution provides a process for electing a president if the vote is corrupt. This is pretty significant that if the vote were to be denied, if the election were to be declared invalid, then it would be turned over to the House to select a president, and to the Senate, the vice president, where each state legislature would be able to cast one vote, and where some 38 are controlled by the Republicans, suggesting Donald Trump would easily emerge with a kind of victory maybe proportional to what he actually received had the count been honest. Wisconsin is cleared to have a recount here after battles between the Republican Democrats, but most importantly, Dominion Voting Systems has backed out of testifying before the Pennsylvania State House Committee. In my opinion, this is huge in terms of the public impression it's going to make. This is absolutely catastrophic for Dominion. It's going to reinforce the importance of the press conference just held. Here's an expert comment on my blog about it. Okay, let's break this down. A party that's subpoenaed cannot back out. A subpoena is an order to appear. Failure to appear is enforceable against the recalcitrant party up to and including being jailed. The only basis to refuse to appear and testify is to assert a constitutional right against self-incrimination. Thus, Dominion appears to be asserting their Fifth Amendment right to self-incrimination. How can any polling be certified when the company contracted to count the votes says their testimony about how the count was performed would incriminate them in a crime? The above analysis assumes a subpoena was served on Dominion. If its appearance was by agreement, which can be the case, the next step would be to compel their appearance by subpoena. If the committee knows what they're doing, and I suspect they do, then a subpoena should be issued forthwith by the committee to Dominion. At that point, the only way Dominion can refuse to testify is by asserting its Fifth Amendment right against compelled self-incrimination. Such an assertion would reverberate throughout the country and be understood as a virtual admission of guilt. The only reason a subpoena would not be issued were would be if the Pennsylvania Legislative Committee were purposely giving Dominion a pass, which is, of course, a possibility. However, Dominion's refusal to appear to answer questions is damning in and of itself. I could not agree more. Scorpio, your thoughts?
What's the most disturbing thing to me about this is there's so many different layers or levels of voter fraud that they've used. It's like this maze of corruption that we've entered into with this election. It's simply astounding. And the other day I mentioned that Tucker Carlson on Friday had said that, oh, the election is over. He did it twice. And then on the show from last night, he talked about Sidney Powell, the attorney, and how he had invited her on the show, and she won't provide any evidence of voter fraud. I think it's someone's gotten to Tucker. He might have been threatened to lose his show. He is turning against this idea of voter fraud, and it's very disappointing.
Scorpio, I couldn't agree more. I was flabbergasted when Tucker went after Sidney, because during the press conference they explained why they couldn't produce the evidence now, but only in the court setting. It would be putting the affiance at risk. Michael, your thoughts?
I loved watching that press conference that Trump's lawyers put on, and I especially loved this new woman, Jenna Ellis, and the way that she just tore into the fake news media covering the press conference. She used the term fake news and fake news networks about a dozen times. And one wonderful quote that she made during that time was she was talking about the jury process and how long it takes to work out, and how they're doing the best they can to get to that point in the short period of time that they have. And she said, relative to the jury selection process, talking to the journalists, so to speak, in the room, she said, I would strike 99% of you from the jury, and I would be allowed to, because the fake news coverage that you provide, you are not unbiased jurors.
No, you're 100% right, Michael. I thought she was brilliant. What a sensation to have her there. Rudy has a certain style I'm not that enthusiastic about. Sidney is simply excellent, but Jenna, wow. Meanwhile, Michigan rescinds votes too. They were threatened. The most important 3-minute video. This is about how it was done using the drop and roll. This is Dominion. Steal the Trump landslide, dump a massive number of tens of thousands of unexplained votes, then the roll. Fix the remaining vote counts in exact proportions to keep the lead, just a narrow lead. Georgia, Trump was up by as much as 57-42, then a dump of unexplained ballots given Biden for hours until he took the lead, then for the next 53 batches of votes. Every single vote batch had exactly a 50.05 to 49.95 victory margin for Biden. Wow. These ratios, of course, are impossible, completely preposterous. Michigan, Trump led for hours by 55-43. The drop at 6:31 a.m., 141,258 votes were dumped for Biden. The roll. And almost every batch after 9:15 had exactly a 50% Biden to 49 Trump ratio. Virginia, Trump leads for hours, 52-46. The drop, 308,000 votes for Biden in the middle of the night. The roll. The ratio's then set to 50% Biden, 49% for Trump. Pennsylvania, Trump leads for hours by nearly 700,000 votes on election night. The drop. Democrats find 1 million votes for Biden in the next 48 hours. The roll. The ratio set for the remaining gave Trump only 40% of mail-in ballots per county compared to election day numbers. The ratios were set to steal. The election was stolen. They stole it for Trump. They used a drop and roll, and they were caught. Scorpio, your thoughts?
Well, I thought Michael made a great point earlier about the repetitive use of the fake news That's great. And the more we hear it, the happier I am. And, you know, one thing that's interesting is, you know, all the networks use the same word to describe Trump's challenges of the election. They all say his baseless claims. Every single network says the same exact wording. And to me, that's just indication that these networks are all reading from a centrally controlled script.
Don't take our word for it. See for yourself.
Hi, I'm Fox San Antonio's Jessica Headley.
And I'm Ryan Wolf.
Our greatest responsibility is to serve our
Treasure
Valley communities, the El Paso, Las Cruces communities, Eastern Iowa communities,
Mid-Michigan communities.
We are extremely proud of the quality, balanced journalism that CBS 4 News produces.
But
we are concerned about the trouble and trend of irresponsible, one-sided news stories plaguing our country.
The sharing of biased and false news has become all too common on social media. More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first.
Listen, you always say that facts first. We always say on this network that the facts come first. Wrong.
The sharing of biased and
false news has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media outlets simply aren't true without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think. And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
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 I tell you what, we are in a truth emergency right now.
We don't have independent networks. It's all coming from a central source, which makes it even more nefarious. And, you know, the amount of fraud in this election is just staggering. And if it isn't uncovered and stopped and exposed, we will never have a fair, legitimate election in this country again. So this issue is even bigger than just Donald Trump. This is the heart of elections. If this isn't stopped, we will never have a real election again.
Those were just the kind of points Jenna was making. That this hasn't to do with Republicans or Democrats. It has to do with the integrity of our voting, our election system. Michael, your thoughts?
Yeah, Scorpio, the two words that they keep drilling into the American public is baseless and unsubstantiated.
Right.
The video that you just went through, stills on, Jim, is a fabulous video. It needs to be spread around as much as we possibly can. If we have any kind of court system that understands statistics, the statistics that are revealed on that video and in these investigations are totally impossible, other than having this system rigged. So far, that video is still up at YouTube. And I want to say something about YouTube. They started about 4 or 5 years ago putting these little statements at the bottom of the video screen, and that basically any video that they think, oh, people shouldn't be saying these kinds of things, they'll put a statement below the video screen telling us what we should believe. And below this one, and the one that you referenced earlier as well, it says, the AP has called the presidential race for Joe Biden. See more on Google. And my thought was, oh, you mean the same AP that's owned by insane Sabbatean Satanists who own that and Reuters, the parasitic enemies of humanity at large, have called it for Biden? Biden's their man? Okay, that's good to know.
Yes. Michael, you got it right. Yeah, it's a very nice, clean, clear explanation. Discussing how they thought they could try this, I say string them all up. No more games. Trump should have an emergency speech, break into all media, override all systems, say it all, hell with the media, time to fight, time to arrest, time to save the nation from all enemies. Share this with everyone. 100% right. Statistical sampling to prove widespread voter fraud, multiple accounts of fraud, voting irregularities may overturn election, call for paper ballots. Actually, Papadopoulos adds all states are in play. Meanwhile, a Vegas odds maker, this is a very nice piece I published on my blog, says the fix was in. Trump was robbed. This election was stolen. So this is from a completely different perspective, a Las Vegas odds maker and sports gaming expert for 4 decades before he became a nationally syndicated conservative talk show host, Wayne Root. I understand odds and gambling in a way no other conservative media personality, host, or politician could. I can tell you something very wrong with this presidential election. Reminds me of a fixed football game back in 1978. Gamblers feel the same way about this election. It's rancid. It feels as fixed as a giant Eagles NFL game. Let me give you the details from a gambler's perspective. Trump entered the night a 2-1 underdog. As soon as the polls closed, the picture became clear. Trump's odds moved to even money. Then Trump became the slight favorite, then a moderate favorite, then a 2-1 favorite, then 3-1, 4-1, 5-1, 6-1, 7-1. Finally, Trump moved to an 8-1 favorite. What does this all mean? Bettors putting their money on the line during election night have always proven to be deadly accurate. Smart bettors can clearly see what direction a race is taking. Bettors around the world clearly saw what I saw when they stared at the electoral map. Trump was headed for an electoral landslide. But something wasn't quite right. Fox wouldn't call Florida for Trump, even though he was ahead by a mile. They wouldn't call Ohio, even though Trump was ahead by a mile. They wouldn't call Texas, even though Trump was ahead by a mile. I sat there screaming at my television, more strange calls. Fox had called Virginia for Biden at the start of the night when Trump was well ahead. Trump would remain ahead for 3 long hours after Fox awarded the electoral vote to Biden. Why would they do that? What was the rush? It made no sense. Biden was awarded Virginia with Trump ahead, but Trump was ahead by a mile in Florida, Ohio, and Texas, yet Fox News refused to award him the electoral votes. I knew at that moment something was wrong. Something smelled fishy. Something was rotten in the D.C. swamp. Bettors witnessed Trump dominating. He cleared not only one of those key states of Florida, Ohio, and Texas, but enjoyed large leads in the entire Midwest, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Iowa. It was all but over. Trump had an electoral landslide, hence the massive 8-1 odds. And then it happened. It was the most bizarre call in election night history. Fox called Arizona for Biden. Why? It wasn't even close. There was no reason to make that call. Arizona was still not over 8 days later. CNN still hadn't awarded Arizona. ABC pulled back from Biden only 24 hours ago. Why would Fox be in such a rush to call Arizona? At that moment, Trump's odds crashed almost instantly from 8-1 back down to 2-1. That drop set off alarm bells. My friend, one of the biggest bookies in the country, called me to say, Wayne, something's wrong. I've never seen a drop like that, let alone a drop that fast. How can Trump go from 8-1 to 2-1? Someone knows something. We've got a problem. It's as if someone decided to advance to give Arizona to Biden, whether he wanted or not. It was as a secret code known only to a few billionaire gamblers. Fox awards Arizona to Biden, 6 magic words. Someone was ready for that call. Someone waited until Trump was a prohibitive 8-1, then knew to bet millions on Biden at the longest odds of the night. Someone knew the fix was in. Someone made a fortune. There's more to this story. First, by awarding both Virginia and Arizona to Biden way too early, also going super slow, awarding states to Trump, where he led by a mile. Fox made sure Biden had the electoral lead all night. That's another big part of the story. Just like the fake pollsters suppressed Trump voters for months in advance, with polls falsely showing him losing by a landslide. Fake news desk employees appear to be suppressing Trump votes on election night and created an air of invincibility for Biden. If Biden led in every poll before the election and led all night in electoral votes, then it wouldn't look like a fix was in when Biden suddenly wound up the winner the morning after, right? One more piece of the puzzle. For almost the moment that secret code, Fox News awards Arizona Biden was spoken. 3 key Midwest battleground states with Democrat governors all decided to stop counting votes for the night, with Trump way ahead. Why? Why all 3 at the same time? Like they were coordinated in advance. Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania all mysteriously quit counting around midnight. To add to the idea of a fix, these states merely claimed they were stopping counting for the night. After TV cameras and Republican poll watchers were all sent home, the Democrat states resumed counting, suddenly finding all the ballots they needed to overcome large Trump leads. I actually took screenshots before I went to bed. Trump was winning Michigan by over 300,000 votes when they stopped counting, up in Wisconsin by over 100,000, in Pennsylvania almost 700,000. But in the wee morning, I took a new screenshot. Suddenly, Biden was up by 9,000 in Wisconsin, 30,000 in Michigan. How did that happen? I thought they had stopped counting. It all started with that bizarre Arizona call by Fox. Folks, someone knew the fix was in. A few key people made millions betting on this election. They knew the exact moment to jump in. They knew exactly when a Trump landslide would turn to be a Biden victory with the help of a fake TV network call and fake ballots. They knew Arizona was going to be called way too early. They knew that fake Arizona call would trigger vote counting to stop and massive ballot fraud to begin. I think that's just such an insightful account. Scorpio, your thoughts?
This is shocking. It's just another level of the corruption we're seeing. This election is so corrupt that even gamblers are shocked by the level of corruption. It's really staggering. And this kind of reminds me of the airline shorts that were made right before 9/11 happened on the very airlines that would be affected by 9/11. So lots of people made money on that too. And of course, insiders know what's going to happen ahead of time. And we're just seeing how the game works here from the outside. And just to go on to something Michael said about the AP, it was the AP that called the election first. And it was only after the AP said Biden has won the election that all of the other networks jumped aboard immediately. So it's like their master told them when they were allowed to make the call. Because Michael already called out who owns the AP, and it's just very shocking the level of corruption we're living in, Jim. I'm shocked.
Yeah, well, the 9/11 Commission co-chairs followed up on the shorts on United and American and said, but they couldn't have had anything to do with it. Why? Because it was a CIA. Can you believe that? I mean, these were gullible saps. Of course, the CIA was in on 9/11, and the neocons in the Department of Defense and the Mossad. This was an Israeli op. Michael, your thoughts?
Yeah, that's another great article that emphasizes the importance of statistics in understanding what happened here. And that's from this sports and gaming odds maker. And Scorpio, you took the words right out of my mouth about, it reminded me of the big put options that were put on the airlines on 9/11. And that makes me wonder if those bets that he references here that came at the exact right time can be traced back. I'm thinking you have operatives for the Clinton Global Initiative and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation making those bets.
Oh, the answer is affirmative. Yeah, they can be traced back. It will happen. And of course, what we're seeing here is all further proof that Trump actually won an historic landslide with 410 electoral votes, even including California. They saw it coming. They had to do something about it. The CSITL data showed this landslide win for President Trump. Astonishing. Meanwhile, A top pathologist claims that coronavirus is the greatest hoax ever perpetrated on an unsuspecting public. This is Dr. Roger Hodgkinson, who told government officials in Alberta during a Zoom conference the current coronavirus is the greatest hoax ever perpetrated on an unsuspecting public. They were made during a discussion involving the Community and Public Service Committee. The clip was subsequently uploaded. Noting he was also an expert in virology, pointed out his role as CEO of a biotech company that manufactured COVID tests means I might know a little bit about all of this. There is an utterly unfounded public hysteria driven by the media and politicians. It's outrageous. This is the greatest hoax ever perpetrated on an unsuspecting public. The doctor said that nothing could be done to stop the spread of the virus beside protecting older, more vulnerable people, and that the whole situation represented politics playing medicine, and that's a very dangerous game. He remarked that social distancing is useless because COVID is spread by aerosols, which travel 30 meters or so before landing, as he called for society to be reopened immediately to prevent the debilitating damage being caused by lockdowns. He also slammed mandatory mask mandates as completely pointless. Masks are utterly useless. There's no evidence base for their effectiveness whatsoever. Paper masks and fabric masks are simply virtue signaling. They're not even worn effectively most of the time. It's utterly ridiculous. Seeing these unfortunate, uneducated people, I'm not saying that in a pejorative sense, seeing these people walking around like lemmings, obeying without any knowledge base to put the mask on their face. The doctor also slammed the unreliability of PCR tests, knowing positive test results do not, under the neon, mean a clinical infection, and that all testing should stop because the false numbers are driving public hysteria. We have a report of 97% false positives. He said the risk of death in the province of Alberta for people under the age of 65 was 1 in 300,000, that it was simply outrageous to shut down society for what the doctor said was just another bad flu. I'm absolutely outraged that this has reached this level. It should all stop tomorrow. His credentials are beyond question, with MedMail Doctor's website affirming his credibility. Meanwhile, in Pennsylvania, one of the worst mask mandates yet in the country, unbelievable. Pennsylvania Health Department released a new list of orders with the hope of controlling. The most notable is an indoor mask mandate for people inside their own homes. Strengthening mask order. Masks are still required indoors. Masks now required anytime you're with people outside your household, even if you're socially distant. Applies to all indoor facilities if you have people in your home not part of your household. Even if the messaging on mask wearing effectiveness had not been mixed up until this point, this mandate is an absolute insane overreach of government power. No state has the right to tell private citizens what to wear within the comfort of their own homes. Issuing a mandate of this nature is an absolute trampling of Americans' personal liberties. Fortunately, it's virtually impossible to enforce. In addition to that ridiculous demand, Department of Health is requiring anyone who visits Pennsylvania from another state to be tested within 72 hours of entering the state. Issuing order requiring anyone who visits PA from another state to be tested within 72 hours. Pennsylvanians who travel to other states must follow the same order. If this incredibly invasive mandate communicates anything, it's power-hungry politicians are using the coronavirus pandemic as an excuse to flex their bureaucratic muscles. The primary concern isn't mitigating the disease, it's establishing greater government control over citizens' personal lives. This is completely outrageous, especially when you have leading experts explaining it's all for naught and it's tremendously harmful. Scorpio, your thoughts?
This is outrageous. Well, of course, if you look at the head honcho of the Pennsylvania Department of Health, it's a Jewish transsexual, a very confused individual and a bizarre looking creature, let's say. And we're supposed to be taking advice on how to live our lives from this person? Wow, okay. And, you know, it's just amazing. You guys have probably seen this too, where you see someone in their car driving alone with a mask on, with the windows up. I mean, this insanity is going to keep spreading until people realize that they're being played. And you've got to wonder how many people are going to die from bacterial pneumonia from wearing these masks. It is so incredibly dangerous. And, you know, before the show started, you guys were talking about someone who lost their job on a construction job for not wearing a mask. Can you imagine doing hard physical labor with a mask on? I mean, that is inhumane. It's horrible.
And it's killing your brain cells, putting strain on your cardiovascular system, promoting diseases, just as you observed. Michael, your thoughts?
Yeah, that the first article that you put up, the Canadian Dr. Roger Hodkinson, that's such a fabulous statement that he made, and it's wonderful that it got out into the alternate media. I've been spreading that article around a lot, and you can tell that he's really got integrity when he says that he's in charge of a company that's actually selling COVID-19 tests, and then in the same breath he says that he can tell you that those tests cannot identify a clinical infection. That's a guy with some integrity right there. Then the story about Pennsylvania's mask mandate. Oh Lord, every time I see a photo of that public health director, I think I've never even seen a linebacker that ugly before. So I don't know how she got I don't even want to say she got into that position, but so there's some psychological stuff going on there.
Next thing, they're going to be issuing mandates that we all have to have sex change operations. I mean, this has reached far beyond the point of absurdity. Meanwhile, a report, Biden's proposed gun control plan would hit gun owners with as much as $34 billion in taxes. They're still trying to find a way. It's insane, even though after all the rioting and looting, everyone knows you have to be able to defend yourself. My God, his own party ran on the platform of defunding the police, for God's sake. Outlet figures calculated by the National Shooting Sport Foundation show some 20 million modern sporting rifles, 150 million ammunition magazines in the country could be subject to a new tax under Biden's plan. Unbelievable. Assault weapons and high-capacity magazines, where, of course, that's a political notion, an assault weapon that's an automatic weapon used in warfare, which aren't legal anyway. The regulatory laws already affect the possession of machine guns, silencers, short-barreled rifles, which owners are required to register. If the existing law were to be applied to the 170 million modern sporting rifles and ammo, a 200 tax on each unit would amount to $34 billion. Under the Biden plan, individuals who now possess assault weapons or high-capacity magazines have two options: sell the weapon to the government or register them. So in essence, gun owners who choose to keep their weapons are forced to register them and pay a tax. This is the kind of thing that has been done in other countries when they want to confiscate weapons, have no doubt about it. Meanwhile, as Dr. Eowyn has published in her wonderful Fellowship of the Minds, a Gallup poll, only 25% support a ban on handguns. Look at the sign at Liberty Arms. Statistically, you're more likely to be killed by Hillary Clinton than an AR-15. That's literally true.
I love that sign.
Yeah. Here are poll results. Telephone interviews with a minimum quota of 70% cell phone respondents, 30% landline of over 1,000 adults 18 and older in all 50 states. Support for a ban on the possession of handguns, only 25%, a decrease of 18 from its 1991 high, and near the lowest in Gallup's 40-year trend. 74% of U.S. adults said a ban should not be put in place. Support for stricter laws on the sale of firearms, while 57% support stricter laws. This is a 7% decline since last year. In 1990, as many as 78% wanted stricter laws. 34% of U.S. adults prefer the gun laws be kept as they are now. 9% would like them to be less strict. Those who want stricter, more women, 67 than men, 46. More Democrats, 85, and independents, 60 than Republicans, 22. More non-gun owners, 72 than gun owners, 26. More blue than red states, East 68, West 63, Midwest 50, South 49. or residents of cities 65 and suburbia 58, then rural 46. Mass shooting false flags like Sandy Hook and Parkland worked, but only for a time. Gallup points out that Americans' preference for tougher gun control have generally peaked in the wake of prominent mass shootings and waned as the memory of each fades. I have books about both that have both been banned by Amazon because they exposed that they were complete frauds to promote gun control. If you want to learn the history here, check out the Second Amendment and the politics of gun control. Go to JimTheConspiracyGuy.com and you can check it out, or BitChute Jim Fetzer. President Trump is a staunch supporter of the Second Amendment, while Biden, Harris, and the Democrats are for gun control. Given these findings of a decline in American support for gun control, it's all the more curious that Biden is supposed to have won the election, but we know it was a fraud. I can't see any issue on which he would have had support from Americans. Scorpio, your thoughts?
Well, I agree, Jim. And is Biden going to do anything to actually help the American people? I mean, he's going to take away guns or make them more expensive, more difficult to get, lockdowns, mass mandates, giving illegal alien citizenship. I mean, what is this going to do to help American people? Nothing. And, isn't it strange, Jim, that all of the school shootings have suddenly stopped with the appearance of COVID? If I didn't know better, I think there might be a conspiracy at work here, Jim.
Well,
don't use
what
that
can we
word.
say about you, David? Michael, your thoughts?
Yeah, in the context of gun control, in the aftermath of the passage of, what was it called, the Smith-Mundt Modernization Act,
yes,
that allowed our governmental bodies to basically brainwash the American people and to deceive them. We have this rash of shootings, and for those who have good analytical skills, such an obvious A equals B equals C thing. And on that subject, I got to say, Jim, you are one of the very biggest heroes for the American people with the amount of exposition of these deceptions that you've done, especially with Sandy Hook and the others as well. There's been many of them. And you've been the one who's been out there taking the heat as a result of it, and you deserve all the kudos you can have.
Oh, Michael, thank you. Thank you for those kind words. Amazon's been very eager to ban my books. 6 of the 12 books we published at Moonrock Books, Amazon has banned 6. Meanwhile, Facebook appears to have broken the law by censoring anti-Biden ad, a conservative group claims. The American Principles Project fired a federal election commission complaint against Facebook, claiming that social media broke the law by censoring an ad attacking Joe Biden and Senator Gary Peters, slamming their support for a law that would force biological girls to compete with biological boys. Even though PolitiFact could find no factual error in the ad, the fact check claimed the ad was missing context because it contradicted Biden's transgender agenda. Facebook used this fact check to flag the ad. This is disgusting. Here was the ad. All female athletes wanted a fair shot at competition, at a scholarship, at a title, at a victory. But what if that shot was taken away by a competitor who claims to be a girl but was born a boy? Senator Gary Peters and Joe Biden support legislation that would destroy girls' sports. They call it equality. Really? That's not fair. Not fair at all. The voice over reads as the video shows teenage girls running a race and losing to a boy. Vote against Gary Peters and Joe Biden. They are too extreme for Michigan. This ad echoes longstanding complaints about the dangers of allowing biological males who claim to be transgender to compete against biological females in women's sports. In February, 3 high school girls and their mothers filed a Title IX lawsuit against the Connecticut Interscholastic Athletic Conference, challenging pro-transgender rules that allow biological males to compete in women's high school sports. The three girls have lost multiple state championships to biological boys who identify as female. This is simply absurd. While boys and girls have comparable athletic abilities before boys hit puberty, male puberty quickly increases the levels of circulating testosterone in healthy teen and adult males to levels 10 to 20 times higher than the levels in healthy adult females. This natural flood of testosterone drives a wide range of physiological changes that give males a powerful physiological athletic advantage over females. The inescapable biological facts of the human species are not stereotypes, social constructs, or relics of a past discrimination. The suit lists 8 broad physiological athletic advantages males enjoy over females and women after the onset of puberty, including larger lungs, larger hearts, increased number of muscle fibers, muscle mass, higher myoglobin within muscle fiber, enabling faster transfer of oxygen to the muscles, larger and longer bones, increased mineral density in bones and height. Due to these long recognized advantages, sporting events have long had different standards for boys and girls to accommodate. Women's volleyball nets are 7 inches lower. The weight of high school shot puts for boys is 36% heavier. The hurdle is 6 inches higher for boys. Even the Journal of Medical Ethics, which has published an article calling for Child Protective Services to remove gender-confused kids from their parents if the parents won't give them experimental transgender drugs, also published an article condemning the intolerable unfairness of the Olympic Committee's pro-transgender rules. Yet Democrats like Biden and Peters have endorsed the Equity Act. This is so disgusting. PolitiFact's fact check didn't claim the ad was false, but refamed the issue to benefit Biden and Peters. The basis for the attack? Peters has co-sponsored the Equality Act, a bill that would prohibit discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identification in employment, education, and public accommodation. Joe Biden also supports a bill, but that wasn't the point. It ran with a Republican pounce angle. They ran a quote from Peters' re-election campaign toward the top of the article, denouncing it as a blatant attempt to mislead voters and distort the truth about the Equality Act. PolitiFact reserved Schelling's quote for the 25th paragraph of the article, after quotes from Peters supporting the bill and a supporter of the National Women's Law Center. Did not even mention the fact that many feminists, some outspoken lesbians, have joined with conservatives in opposing the Equality Act because it opens up women's private spaces to biological men. This is just so insulting. This is so obvious. It took forever to create women's sports and get them funded separately. Now the Democrats want to destroy all those advances that allow women to compete against other women in fair competition and makes them feel good about themselves. Scorpio, your thought?
Well, it's time people call it for what it is. This is an anti-female agenda. It's just saying you can replace a woman with a man on hormones, and this is extremely dangerous on so many levels. And on the big picture, Jim, really what we have here is we have a totalitarian government hiding behind so-called trans freedom and gay sex as a way to prove, well, look, we support freedom. We're not a oppressive government at all. This is something they're just using to hide behind and cover up the fact that we have a totalitarian government that's in the act of being formed right now. And this is all just smoke and mirrors to confuse people on many levels.
That's right, because politically and ideologically, they are absolutely uniform. They obey complete obedience, and otherwise they'll censor you or punish you or kick your ass. Michael, your thoughts?
This is stuff that's particularly interesting to me because this was my field in my working career. I did 22 years in the enforcement of anti-discrimination laws and actually supported, at that time, there was nothing associated with discrimination, or legally speaking, association with discriminating against gays and lesbians. And I supported the inclusion of gays and lesbians in the anti-discrimination laws, because I don't think people should be discriminated against for that reason. If a company is of a certain size or above. But this, where they've taken this, that was only the beginning of where they were going. This stuff about transgender, everything, a zillion different kinds of gender designations, is political correctness gone insane. The phrase that came to mind while you were reading that is pathological altruism. And in this case, the pathology is pathological identity politics, pathological worship of minorities, and pathological political correctness.
Oh, Michael, that was wonderfully said. I completely agree, and I know Scorpio as well.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, a senator reveals secret info from Facebook whistleblower, leaving Zuckerberg speechless. For most watching a Senate hearing on any topic, it falls between boring and please gouge my eyes out on the scale of interest. But when the Silicon Valley tech czars testify, it was electric. Side note, who told Mark Zuckerberg to jump in a tanning booth right before the hearing to look more human? The results were unconvincing. Senator Josh Hawley, who's impressed me greatly, just about made Zuckerberg swallow his tongue during the hearing, showing him internal screenshots of Facebook's censorship platform, which a whistleblower provided his office. What happened next was remarkable. For context, it's important to understand what tech companies actually fear. They don't care about amending Section 230 or some of the other threats that Congress has made, which would have them liable for the content they do or do not publish. What they fear is U.S. antitrust law. It's one thing if Google's censoring conservatives on YouTube and its other platforms, while Twitter is censoring using its platform, and Facebook on Facebook. But if companies are coordinating their censorship, they're in violation of antitrust laws. When you watch this video, that's what Hawley is really pressing Zuckerberg to deny under oath. Yes, and multiple times to deny coordination with Google and YouTube. I watched this as it happened. Zuckerberg, one of the most powerful tech oligarchs, suddenly looked like he'd accidentally swallowed a frog. Meanwhile, Twitter has slapped a warning label on 23 Trump posts just this week so far. Twitter has placed warning labels on 23 posts and retweets from President Trump, calling his post disputed, since he's trying to explain how the election fraud has taken place. Voter fraud in Detroit is rampant, has been for many years. Twitter adds this claim about election fraud is disputed. Another, the numbers have not improved. It's still 71% out of balance in Wayne County, Michigan. Canvassers, there are widespread irregularities in poll numbers. There are more votes than people. To arrest, Patriot canvassers refused to sign the papers. Twitter adds this claim about election fraud is disputed. They don't even allow Republican observers into the building to watch. A terrible insult to our Constitution. An obvious fact that nevertheless Twitter says is disputed. Dominionizing the vote. We now see what that's all about. Again, Twitter. This claim about election fraud is disputed. This is disgusting beyond belief. I think all these tech giants and the media that have participated in perpetrating this electoral fraud motivated by Dominion are going to come down by the executive order of 2018. Scorpio, your thoughts?
Well, this Zuckerberg character is looking more and more like a cyborg. He's starting to look like Data on Star Trek. I don't know what's going on with him, but he's very odd looking. And, on a more serious note, these tech companies are effectively monopolies, and now they are behaving like monopolies because they have no regard for what the public thinks or serving the public. That's what happens when you have a monopoly, and that's why they're so incredibly dangerous. And the other thing is all of these big tech companies are deeply infiltrated, I believe, controlled by intelligence agencies. They're being used as tools by them. And don't forget that much of the seed funding for several of these companies were, in fact, from intelligence agencies.
Oh, yeah. Facebook was LifeLog until the following day it became Facebook. and it was an intel operation. Michael, your thoughts?
Yeah, all of these big tech giants are owned and operated by Jewish oligarchs that I believe to be plying their larger agenda for a one world government control system. So to wonder if they're all on the same page is just naive to me. The first story there I wanted to ask about, talking about U.S. antitrust laws. It says, but if companies are coordinating their censorship actions, they're violating U.S. antitrust laws. But if they're judged to be monopolies, as they should be, and as Scorpio noted, can't a monopoly violate antitrust laws as well?
Yes. Yes, you're 100% correct, Michael. They're vulnerable in more ways than one. So
the fact that they're coordinating their actions doesn't make them any less liable for antitrust laws if we had a system that would actually pursue them.
I agree, Michael, and that is going to happen. I have no doubt. Even if Trump were denied the re-election, the Congress is going to pursue this. But with Trump in, it's going to be with great vigor and effect.
One more comment I wanted to say. Those little statements that Twitter is putting about this claim is disputed. That's exactly the same type of thing that YouTube is doing at the bottom of the video screens, telling you what you ought to believe.
Just a coincidence, Michael. No coordination there. No propaganda. No imposition of ideological uniformity.
What was I thinking?
Yeah.
We want to hear from you. Send us fan mail, pro or con, to live-need-to-know@gmail.com. Live-need-to-know@gmail.com. Several comments from my blog in reply to Tony from Will. I haven't done this press conference justice. It can't be overstated how important this case is. Sidney Powell says it's international in scope. She also says every Republican in the country who lost the contest should contest the result. The fraud is that widespread. It's impossible to calculate the effect this information will have. The case is overwhelming. The team is righteously angry, like biblically so. It's hard to imagine it going away quietly like every other lie in our lifetime. JFK comes to mind. With it, Giuliani had pursued 9 the way, 11 the way he's been on this. Perhaps it's compensatory. If you didn't know about him taking out the mafia, you wouldn't have guessed he was ever a prosecutor. He sure didn't act that way as America's mayor. But I agree with Dr. Fetzer. Rudy has never been this good. This is bigger than the mafia. Another, a superb article that puts a PCR test where it belongs. This, by the way, was authored by Giuseppe Vaffangulo that I republished. So this is praising our colleague Giuseppe. A superb article that puts a PCR test where it belongs, in the lab for scientific studies, not in the hands of those using it erroneously and illegally as a test for what's probably the common cold. If that, it now begs the question, if the PCR test used to its maximum as a test for the vid is worthless, on what are we basing a lockdown of this entire planet? The answer is quite simple. It's based on propaganda supported by the MSM, the rat Fauci and Bill Gates from hell, lies and deceptions that'll make these perpetrators an ongoing fortune. Withdraw consent. Do not take a test. Do not take a vaccine. Stop being a mass fool. It's a muzzle turning wearers into faceless, silent automatons. Another, if you haven't watched it yet, you got to see Giuliani, Sidney Powell, and Jenna Ellis lambast the media at today's press conference. They were there as Trump's legal team to give an overview of the evidence for the electoral fraud and kept telling the press this was your job. Just watch it. It's too priceless. I can't believe this is happening. The unknown is how far the revelations will go. Finally, this is from Jim Stone on Tucker Carlson's last night. A couple of quick items. Somewhat surprisingly, Tucker outed himself as a deep state troll. He was nothing but ridicule over the amazing press conference, demanding evidence, stating it wasn't credible without it. Sidney Powell rebuffed it while saying basically Tucker himself had the means to uncover the evidence and then report it, that she wasn't going to spoil her court case by giving out what they had. After all, if Tucker was legit and Fox was legit, they'd be reporting it, and they are not. They would have done their own investigations, and they did not. So they have no grounds whatsoever to call the charges unsupported. As expected, Fox had a grand mal over the press conference, the same way the rest of the MSM did, and the exodus from these platforms needs to be complete. Clearly, obviously, America will go nowhere but down a whirlpool with them. I am stunned by the extent to which Tucker came out of the closet when he really had to. He's a bona fide POS, just like the rest of them, a hoax actor fighting for the truth, waiting in reserve to dash its last credibility into the great white hope of corruption. Hopefully, hope he didn't drag too many viewers into it. I suspect not. They're waking up, and the numbers at Fox prove it. I'm outraged by Tucker's reaction to the press conference. He should have been thrilled if he was really one of us, but no, he just melted in the cesspool with the rest of them, telling Powell and Rudy they had nothing. That ought to finish Fox for good. Meanwhile, everyone, all the conspiracies and false flags you could want to know about, False Flags and Conspiracies 2020, online, a virtual conference, 5 and 6 December. I will be hosting it. Check it out at falseflagconspiracies2020.com. There's a special right now, but you need to know what's been going on. Meanwhile, final thoughts. Scorpio, yours.
Well, what's so incredible about this COVID thing is this notion of asymptomatic spreaders. So you tested positive for corona, even though you feel fine, but our scientists say that you have COVID, so you might be an asymptomatic spreader. It's a great excuse to track everyone and to fear everybody. Now they have it so that every human being around the world is essentially your enemy. That person next to you might be an asymptomatic spreader, even your close family member. This is a diabolical plan, and I really hope people start to see through it very quickly, because the end game of this plan is not a pretty one. And I thought that the viewer did a great job. The letter about Tucker, the email about Tucker, he covered all the bases. It was very well stated, and I have to agree. Tucker really did out himself for these last few days.
I do have some great commentators on my blog at jamesfetzer.org. Michael, your final thoughts.
I'm glad Scorpio just brought up the concept of asymptomatic transmission, because it's one of the key building blocks of the brainwashing propaganda construct that they've imposed on the whole world. And they hit it hard right at the first. When they were first talking about shutdowns, they talked a lot about asymptomatic transmission, and it's the exact psychological fear element that makes everybody, not just people who are sick, it makes everybody afraid of everybody else, and it's evil. It's very disappointing that Tucker caved in on this this last story, this issue about the press conference, when he has in many respects been on a really great roll, to the extent that a lot of us thought, wow, how is he keeping his job? Well, I guess we found out that he's keeping his job because he goes as far as they let him go, and he can't go any farther. And then he did some stepping in reverse now. And the last thing I want to say is that everybody needs to keep their heads up and identify those people around you who you can talk to, who you can talk freely with, and who understand what's actually going on. Because there's going to be people close to you, your friends, your long old-time friends, that all of this is splitting up, and don't let it get you down. Identify the people you can talk to and talk to them.
Oh, Michael, you have said a mouthful there. There are stresses in my own family. The persons I care about and love the most are upset that my views do not correspond with theirs. I'm profoundly disappointed about Tucker Carlson. Let me just say, as I am here in Madison, Wisconsin, how much I appreciate the excellence of my colleagues. David Scorpio from the exotic land of Ecuador, Michael Ivey from Asheville, North Carolina. I think the outline of the situation is at this point in time very, very clear. There was a massive effort to steal this election from Donald Trump. They used the media to hype and exaggerate expectations so that when they stole the election, it would seem to be a confirmation for what nobody expected from a guy who'd been hiding in his basement, who'd been outed by his son's laptop content with the media massively suppressed to be corrupt to the core, who couldn't draw 10 people to a rally. Donald Trump brilliantly anticipated the effort and in an executive order of 2018 set up a situation where any foreign interference would lead to the confiscation of assets and punishment, criminal punishment for the crimes thereby committed against the United States. They have fallen into his trap. Not only will Dominion, which is founded in Germany, and Citadel from Spain, which was counting our votes in Germany, going to go down, but potentially the mainstream media and all of their assets are at risk. And as well as the tech giants who have aided and abetted. This may turn out to be a great day for America. Trump may prove himself to be the greatest president the world has ever seen. But if Joe Biden is inaugurated on 20 January, by God, be prepared. Stock up on supplies and ammo. Lock and load. Because we'll have the choice between living as slaves or as free men. And I say, give me liberty or give me death. Thank you for joining us. We'll be back on Monday with more of the news you need to know.